Welcome to our study on the book of Romans. This is Romans Education Part 7, and this is Session 14. Now, the statement I left off with you last time was, the book of Psalms is written to the believing remnant. It is going to be part of their education out in the day of wrath. And by the way, doesn't that make perfect sense? Who is it that's going to have him function as their deliverer? I mean, doesn't that kind of make sense? They're the ones that are actually undergoing that. And so you have that deliverer aspect, of course later the avenger and king and blesser. So the Psalms, folks, and here's what I'm trying to get across to you. The Psalms are prophetic. In other words, when the Psalms are written back here, see here's David, when the Psalms are written back here, they're talking about the Redeemer, Deliverer, Avenger, King, and Blesser mandates of the covenant made with David, the writer of the Psalms. Do you see? So they're prophetic in nature. So they're really looking forward to some things that are out there. Now, as we get ready, and I'm going to have you turn over to Psalm 5, but before we go over there, I need to introduce you to another thing on your timeline. And this is the thing I haven't talked to you about very much. But right here, and let's put, this is John the Baptist, JB for short. This is John the Baptist, and here's what I need you to put below that. The climactic stage, I should have just put that in the middle, I don't know why I did that. This is the climactic stage in Israel's program. Now that's a terminology that I'm going to have to define for you so that you can understand exactly what's being talked about here. In all of Israel's program, you remember all the way back to Leviticus. Well, where did all that start? It started with Abraham, right? And then Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Jacob has 12 sons. They become the progenitors of the 12 tribes. The tribes go into captivity. You know what? They're small in number. They go into Egypt, into captivity. When they come out, they're a great people. They travel toward a promised land. They get over there on the way and they go under the law. And then guess what happens to them at that time? God outlines the entire course of their history. And because they went under the contract of the law, they are now in a performance system. And if they do the right thing, they get these blessings. If they do these wrong things, they get these curses. And God takes them through, and we're not going to put these up on our timeline, but you know we've been through it. God shows them 5 courses of punishment. And as I wrote up here last time, I took it down because I didn't really mean for it to be on our timeline. But when the Assyrians came in and took the northern kingdom, and the Babylonians came in and took the southern kingdom, that began the 5th course of punishment where Israel was carried away out of the land. And so when they were carried away captive, what did you have? You had the 70 years of that captivity. And while Daniel was carried away captive, remember, he's there in the first part of that 5th course of punishment, and he prays to the Lord about, is this all? At the end of the 70 years, and he knew it was 70 years because Jeremiah had already written his book about it. And he says, at the end, is this going to be it? Is this 70 years it? And then God tells him, there's going to be 70 weeks of years. And then, so you're going to add another 490 years to that. And see, that's on top of the 70. And so what do you have here? You have 560 years. So when you're coming through, and remember this thing was broken up into parts. Just think of it this way. You have the 49 years under the Medes and Persians. Remember the way Daniel broke that up? He said there'll be 7 weeks and 62 weeks, which is 62 weeks. And that gave you 69, and that left 1 week, which was the 70th week. And of course, we know that's that last 7 years, Daniel's 70th week, or the tribulation, or the day of wrath. That last year there. So what? And in the midst of that, remember, we had 400 years of silence when God didn't say anything to the nation. All right, well, the only point I'm trying to make to you is that in over 500 years of what God said was going to be happening to them, by the time they get here, because here's what he says. And after 62 years, you've had the 7 years, the 7 weeks of years, which is the 49 years under the Medes and Persians. And then you've got the 434 years. Let me just put them up here. And you got the 434 years, 400 years of silence, all right? And then when this thing starts, he says, and after 62 years shall Messiah be cut off. So you know that when the Messiah shows up, you only have a little while left on the program. If you're talking about 560 years, and this doesn't even take you back to Abraham, this just starts with the 70 years captivity. If you have all those years, if the only thing you have left is 1 week of years or 7 years, look, let's add to that. Let's take the 7 years here. Let's take how long was, well, let's see, Jesus is how old when He dies? He's 33 years old, right? John the Baptist is born 6 months before Jesus. Let's just call it 34. If you're going to take the 34 and the 7, you're talking about 41 years. If you're talking about, and again, we're not talking about all the way back to Abraham, we're just talking about the 5th course alone. By the way, how long was the judges? Does anybody remember? Yeah, it's over 400 years just in the first course of punishment. I mean, if you want to add all that up, now you know what? Now you're at 1,000. So here's my point. If you're talking about this whole thing of Israel's program, when you get down to the last 41 years, wouldn't you say you're pretty close to the end? If the kingdom was the next thing, couldn't you be saying it's at hand? And that's it. Remember, that's exactly what they were preaching. Here and here, in the extension of mercy and in the time of Jesus' ministry, they were preaching the kingdom to be at hand. So here's what's happening. Draw this little line, put John the Baptist at the top, and write climactic stage at the bottom, because this climactic stage of Israel's program is, and this is the parenthesis, the 4th and the 5th, let me just abbreviate it, course of punishment, COP. It's the 4th and the 5th course of punishment. That is the climactic stage in the program. And the climactic stage of Israel's program, folks, begins with John the Baptist. That's how that begins. Now look, why these two stages? What makes you say that? Look at this timeline and tell me what's happening in those stages that's different from anything else in Israel's history. Well, the Messiah is on the scene. That's one thing. And because He's on the scene, you know something is going to happen. What? Yeah. The mandates of the Davidic covenant are now going to begin to take place. Because remember, He's the one that does those. So He comes on the scene. All of this back here, from right here to right here, this is the 4th course of punishment. I'm sorry, it's not the 5th course of punishment. If you put this in ink, I apologize. I gave you the wrong abbreviation. This is the 5th course of punishment. This is the 4th and the 5th part of the 5th course of punishment. I'm sorry. Now, I got my tongue tangled in my eye tooth and I couldn't see what I was saying. Okay, at least Kim thought that was funny. Okay, great. Thank you, Kim. All right. Now, when you get over here, this is the fifth part of the fifth course of punishment. That straightened that out? Were you looking at that? Okay. Does everybody understand what I'm saying here? There's someone right now on the DVD going, what? It's the what? Fifth course of punishment started when they were carried away captive out of the land. And now you have these parts. Okay. So here's the point that I'm trying to make. It's in the fourth and the fifth part that these mandates of what God promised to David are beginning to be carried out. So in the fourth, you have the Redeemer aspect. And when the fifth cranks up, guess what? The next one comes on the scene. Deliverer. Okay? Now I realize king and blesser take place in the kingdom, but they have to because it's about the king. So it has to. But this is the one that makes all the others possible. But these two, they're all time issues. These two get carried out in conjunction with the finish up of Israel's program, and these two get carried out because He's got to do something for them in the eternal kingdom they can't do for themselves too. And so He will do those there. All right. So Christ is coming. So this climactic stage, the thing I'm trying to just make sure that, I hope I haven't confused you, this climactic stage starts at John the Baptist. It runs all the way to where the program is interrupted. It restarts again after the blessed hope, and then it runs through to the end of Daniel's 70th week.
So the fourth part has not finished yet, right?
Oh, you're talking about the night. Are you looking at the night and say?
But the fourth part, because
What part of the film?
the fourth part went so far.
The fourth part is finished. It is finished. What's not finished is the issue of the night.
That's not part of the fourth part.
No. No, because the fourth part is very specific to Israel, what God is doing with Israel. The night is what Satan is doing with the world at large. Okay. So, okay, so that's a good question. Anybody else got a question here? I want to make sure we understand this before we keep rolling. All right, so the book of Psalms pertains to the fulfillment of those 5 mandates of the Davidic covenant. And so and we said this at the break, so I'm at that point. When those tribulations fall out here in the future, you have certain elements of those that are geared for the apostate nation of Israel, and you have certain elements of those that are geared for the world at large. In the old days, I probably would not have separated those out so easily. I would have just seen them as one or the other. And that's the way I always saw it. In the old days, I used to say, look, it's happening to the whole world. Everything's happening to the whole world. But then you read some things where you realize these things are not happening in the whole world. They're happening in the Middle East. That made you think, oh, well, the tribulation is confined to the Middle East. But that's not totally true either. What you have is elements. Don't you have two, when this program resumes, don't you have two ungodly elements here? Israel and the world. So you know what you have? You have elements of the tribulation that are geared for the world, and you have elements of the tribulation which are geared to the apostate nation of Israel in their land. So that's really the accurate way to look at that. And so here's what's happening for them. The books of Hebrews to Revelation. Now they are going to come back and look at the Psalms and look at the prophets and all of that. But the books of Hebrews to Revelation, there is something sitting in those books written to the believing remnant who find themselves out here in the day of wrath. And it's written to them, this is one of those parallel issues, it's written to them to generate the same attitude in them that their father has toward an ungodly world and an ungodly nation. To make it's just like something is being produced in us, something is also going to be produced in them. And so, Psalm 5. Now let me take you over there. And here's part of what they'll read back in the Psalms. All right? And so here we go. Psalm 5. Give ear to my words, O Lord. Consider my meditation. Hearken unto the voice of my cry, my King and my God. Now see, this is in Psalm 5, so it's in the Redeemer section, but does he make reference to the King? Well, sure he does. But see, it's not going to be the primary focus of this part of the Psalms, but there it is, my King and my God. For unto thee will I pray. My voice shalt thou hear in the morning, O Lord. In the morning will I direct my prayer unto thee, and will look up. For thou art not a God that hath pleasure in wickedness, neither shall evil dwell with thee. The foolish shall not stand in thy sight. Thou hatest all workers of iniquity. Thou shalt destroy them that speak leasing. And I thought, boy, the Avis people are in real trouble right here. You didn't get that, did you? I said hurts. Okay, sorry. Leasing. Oh well, all right. I shouldn't even said that. Thou shalt destroy them that speak leasing. The Lord will abhor the bloody and deceitful man. Now there's that word that we saw back in Romans 12:7. You remember that? Abhor that which is evil, cleave to that which is good. So here's the thing. As we look at this verse, by the way, when they're being taught out here in the day of wrath about how to view the ungodliness of the world, just as we're being taught here how to view the ungodliness of the world, here's the only difference. We're being taught about how to view the world while the Lord is being long-suffering. They're being taught how to view the world while His wrath is being poured out on it. So there is a difference there, and I wanted to point that out. Now, when it says, Thou shalt destroy them that speak leasing, the Lord will abhor the bloody and deceitful man. If you were to read on down in this psalm, you'd find out in verse 8 that there are enemies of the remnant. And it's these enemies that are the wicked that the remnant is going to encounter out in the day of wrath. And if you remember, it's those wicked that are the ones that are pushing the works of darkness, that are increasing the ungodliness of the world. They're the ones that are the drivers. Remember we talked about the train and the guys are in the coal car and they're shoveling the coal to it. They're the ones that are powering the course of this world. And so the ungodliness that's going on in the world, the ungodliness that's going on in Israel, the nation is going to go under those courses of punishment. Now look with me, let's focus here on verse 4. For thou art not a God that hath pleasure in wickedness, neither shall evil dwell with thee. First of all, as a general statement, doesn't everybody believe it's true that God is not a God that has pleasure in wickedness? Well, you would say that's generally true all the time. But when the remnant reads this verse, when they're out here in the future and they read that verse, they're supposed to think about that in the time in which they're living. They're supposed to look around at what's happening in the world at that time, out in the day of wrath, and understand that God has an attitude toward that. And that attitude is, He is not a God that takes pleasure in wickedness. Now, we're going to be given some things that make us realize that in our day-to-day lives, in this dispensation of grace, how God feels about the works of darkness that are going on today. But I'm just trying to say that that's more than just a general statement. But look at the end. This is the part I really want to get to. Neither shall evil dwell with thee. What does that mean? Don't think about this metaphorically. This is the way I would have seen it before. I would have looked at that second part as kind of a repetition of the first part. He just said it in different words. But that's not what that is. There's a colon there that's dividing that out. And when he says, Thou art not a God that hath pleasure in wickedness, neither, and here's another aspect, shall evil dwell with thee. What is that? Has anybody got an idea what that's talking about? What does it mean for something to dwell with you? All right, it resides, it's right there with you. Well, wait a minute. When it says, neither shall evil dwell with thee, can you see how what this is referencing is, there is a day coming in which God is going to dwell in the midst of His creation. When is that? In the kingdom. And guess what is not going to dwell with Him there? This kind of evil. That's right. So if when He comes to dwell, evil is not going to dwell with Him, what does that automatically infer or imply?
It's after the wrath.
Yeah, it's after the wrath, and in that wrath, God is going to have to deal with that evil, right? Because He's not going to allow it to dwell with Him. Let me give you this next one here. Verse 4. Well, I'd already talked to you about that. Verse 5. The foolish shall not stand in thy sight. What is that? He's really talking about the end result of all of this. Evil is not going to dwell with him, and the foolish shall not stand in his sight. So who do you think the foolish are? What is that a description of? Who is that a description of? Yeah, exactly right. Do you remember those? The fool has said in his heart, there is no God. How many times? Now, there's more than one kind of fool in your Bible. I realize that. But in this context, the foolish shall not stand in thy sight. He's talking about they're not going to make it through the day of wrath. They're going to be dealt with. Look at that next part. Thou hatest all workers of iniquity. Strong language. That's how he feels about it. That's his attitude toward it. And when the remnant reads this, they're going to look at that and they're going to say, this is how God feels about it, and this is how we have to feel about it. Why? Why? Why do they have to hate the workers of iniquity like God? And by the way, we did that work on iniquity. We understood what that was. That was the term that God used to describe the offensiveness of sin and unrighteousness and ungodliness. That is the word that describes that it is such an offense to God that His immediate desire is to reach out and exterminate it. It's the extreme offensiveness of it. And when He says that thou hatest all workers of iniquity, thou shalt destroy them that speak leasing. When He's talking about all of that, He's saying, the remnant's going to look at that and say, this is how God feels about that. That's the way I've got to feel about it. And if they don't, what if someone looked at that and said, well, I mean, I know God said that, but really, I mean...
They're not going to get out of the wrath part.
That's right. You know, I need to repeat that for the camera. You know what? You're essentially saying something else too. If they don't look at the evil and the ungodliness of the world, if they don't look at these workers of iniquity the way God does, what will be their attitude? Yeah, they'll just be going, well, that's okay. And if that's how you think about it, is this really going to work in you the way it's supposed? No, it can't. Will you be able to impact what Satan is doing? No, you won't. And by the way, that's the reason we have to go over this. Because me simply standing up here and going, don't like ungodliness. You'd all go, I already don't like ungodliness. But that alone will not produce it in you. It's seeing it and having that word have its effect in your inner man. That's the part that produces that. All right, now I'm going to take you to another psalm. What have I got left here? Now I'm going to take you to another Psalm, Psalm 10. And by the way, as you move through the Psalms, you're going to move through in a cycle type pattern. Remember that return for detail thing that we talked about over and over? God tells you something, and then He comes back later, and He picks it back up, and He adds a little more detail to it, and then later on He brings it back up, and He adds something else to it. Well, you just saw something in Psalm 5 that talks about God hates the workers of iniquity, abhors the evil that's going on in the world. And now what He's going to do in Psalm 10, He's going to pick up on that theme again, and He's going to add some detail. And I'm not after the details so much as us to notice the repetition of the pattern. Psalm 10:1. Why standest thou afar off, O Lord? Why hidest thou thyself in times of trouble? The wicked in his pride doth persecute the poor. Let them be taken in the devices that they have imagined. For the wicked boasteth of his heart's desire, and blesseth the covetous, whom the Lord abhorreth. That word covetous, does that ring a bell? Does that ring a bell? We just read it in Romans 13. Remember when we talked about the last pair was envying and covetousness. Remember that? We just saw that in Romans 13. He's picking up on that. I say he's picking up. This word is sitting back there, and he talks about the Lord abhors that. All right, but I'm not trying to just get back on that. What I'm really after is two things. Number one, the wicked in his pride doth persecute the poor. We talked about the wicked last week. Remember, the wicked are the movers and the shakers behind the positive evil. They're the ones that are stoking the engine. They're the ones that are increasing the ungodliness of the world. They're promoting. They revel in it. They love it. They devote themselves to it. And because they're doing that, they persecute the poor. Let me ask you a question. Are they just after the guy that's broke? Is that what that really is? Let's find some people who don't have any money and persecute them. There's something else going on here. Who are the poor? And by the way, does anybody know where we are in your notes? Page 7? All right, you've got a paragraph there that says, when the wicked persecute the poor, it is a description of, and I put the poor being persecuted. Duh. When the wicked persecute the poor, it's a description of the poor being persecuted. I meant to say, replace the word poor. Talk about Captain Obvious. Okay. Cross out that word poor and write the word remnant. It's the believing remnant being persecuted. Why are they called the poor? Yeah, and why do they have nothing? They had to leave everything. Remember that admonition in Matthew? Don't go back to when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee unto the mountains. And don't go back to get anything, because time is of the essence. Here's the other thing. If everybody takes the mark of the beast and you can't buy or sell without the mark of the beast, guess what? You've lost your ability now to feed yourself or clothe yourself or provide transportation or anything else. You flee to the mountains, you don't have anything, God's going to have to miraculously feed them with manna again over there, because they don't have the ability. You can't go to the store and buy food, you got to have the mark. So now you're in a dilemma. Do I take the mark? Kind of a mistake. Or do I not take the mark, and now I'm being hunted and I can't buy or sell? So the point is, the remnant's going to become, they're going to lose everything. Linda said they don't have anything. They're not going to have anything. That's the poor. So you have to overlook my faux pas. I don't know why I wrote that. I knew I was thinking of the remnant. So now that you've made that correction, they are the poor. By the way, I'll give you a few verses on this. Not just a few. All my bones shall say, Lord, who is like unto thee, which deliverest the poor from him that is too strong for him? Do you see how that applies to the remnant? There is someone too strong for them. but the Lord is going to deliver them. Look, there's always been poor in Israel, and the Scripture says there always will be. There will always be. Oh, see, my mind is doing things. Because I'm thinking about the stuff I could be. Sorry, I'm thinking about the stuff I could be talking to you about that would make the gospel make sense. Can I just? What I got left? Oh, good. 4 minutes. Can I just time out for 1 second? We'll do it on the tape, but just to tell you, the idea, because it was a performance contract, and because if you did well, you got blessings, and if you disobeyed, you got cursings. There was a misrepresentation of that going on during the earthly ministry of the Lord, in that those who had money believed that that was a sign that they were in good standing with God. So if you were poor, what did they naturally assume about you? Yeah, that you were displeasing to God, and this was Him punishing you. And so when those who were rich came in, and you know what? And here's what else they thought. Because I'm in such good standing with God, I must already possess eternal life. So when Jesus comes along and He says, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into heaven, He's not just talking about because the guy has money, but because of the thinking that went along with that made them believe they were already being specially selected by God to be blessed. And do you know, people do that today in the dispensation of grace. They make a lot of money in some endeavor, and they go, and they do it so humbly. And they really do. I'm not trying to throw them under the bus by saying it that way. But they go, I don't know why God has chosen to bless me like this and not everybody else. But that kind of infers that you're kind of a special person, aren't you? Doesn't it? See, you just say that as humbly as you want to, but at the end you still said it. I don't know why God likes me more than He likes you. You're a second childhood. But you know what I'm saying? We look at that and we go, and that's how the world looks at it. It's how the Christian world looks at it today. If their bank account is full and the parking lot is full and everything is going, they look at it, well, God's just been so good to us. And the fact of the matter is, that's not Him. But that's the way we've been trained to look at all of that and view all of that. That's the way they did it. All right, let me move you on down. Psalm 40:17, I am poor and needy, yet the Lord thinketh on me. Thou art my help and my... now you're talking about the deliverance aspect. Because remember, all of this is prophetic out there in the day of wrath. Here we go, Psalm 41:1. Blessed is he that considereth the poor. The Lord will deliver him in time of trouble. Now see, that's very specific. You know what we do? People love the Psalms. You know why? You can read a Psalm and you can just interpret that any old way you want to. You can wrap it around whatever's going on in your life, and you feel like God's just going to make everything turn out happily ever after. That's the way they view those Psalms. Here's the next one. Remember, why am I back over in Psalm 78? Hold on. Did I miss something? Oh, man. All right, I wanted to say one other thing here. Well, okay. All right, it is the next one. Remember this, that the enemy hath reproached, O Lord, and that the foolish people, remember that? The foolish will not stand in His sight. And the foolish people have blasphemed Thy name. O deliver not the soul of Thy turtle dove unto the multitude of the wicked. Forget not the congregation of Thy poor forever. Have respect unto the covenant, for the dark places of the earth are full of the habitations of cruelty. Do you look at these highlighted words, and don't they conjure up things we've already seen here? the foolish people, the wicked, the poor. The dark places of the earth are full of the habitation of cruelty. What does that make you think of? The dark places of the earth. The works of darkness, doesn't that kind of bring that thought to your mind of what's happening? Let's keep going. Oh, let not the oppressed return ashamed. Let the poor and needy praise Thy name. Arise, O God, plead Thine own cause. Remember how the foolish man reproacheth Thee daily. Do you see now the foolish will not stand in His sight? God's not just talking about a guy that's not very wise and I'm going to be mad at him because he's not smart. He's talking about people who are diametrically opposed to Him. Verse 23, forget not the voice of thine enemies, the tumult of those that rise up against thee increaseth continually. That word tumult, did that ring a bell with you? Remember Psalm 83? The kings of the earth and the rulers that made a tumult and they confederated together against the Lord and His anointed one. I didn't put the verse in there, but I'm just saying, we've seen all these terms, and we know what those are. Take a look at Psalm 82:4. Deliver the poor and needy, rid them out of the hand of the wicked. And see, now because you understand from last week what the wicked was, now you understand what's going on with that. How about Proverbs 19:17? But I've heard this thing quoted in the dispensation of grace more times than I can count. He that hath pity upon the poor lendeth unto the Lord. And that which He hath given will He repay him again. Someone's going to, they go, why are you doing that? Because it's like lending to the Lord. Hey, I know. There's not anything I can talk about. I haven't gotten it wrong. But here it is. When you're talking about the believing remnant out in the day of wrath, and they don't have anything, and somebody comes along and helps that remnant, either by means of food or clothing or money or whatever it might be, that's when He's talking about lending to the poor. Giving to the poor is like lending to the Lord. Is the Lord going to repay that? Well, you better believe He is. Of course He is. But He's not talking about exactly right then. When will a lot of that be repaid? Huh? Well, if you have the mark, you won't be lending to the remnant. But here's a guy, well, you know what, I say that. I can actually think of a scenario where a guy took the mark because, well, I don't know though. If you take the mark, I got to think about that. Well, you know what, if you take that mark, there is a way to get rid of that mark. I do know that. There is a way to get rid of that mark. We can talk about that one day, but if a guy, here's Clifford, and he has means. Trying to think of is, if he helps a member of the remnant, I need to think about that. Let me just say it this way for now, and I may come back and refine all of this a little bit. Here's Clifford, and you know what? If you're going to help the remnant, it's not just, well, I just hate to see people that are going without. You realize there's a very real risk to all of this. And so he helps the remnant out. In the kingdom, that will be repaid multiplied. It is the same thing that the Lord told them, whosoever has given up houses or lands or all that other stuff, it will be given to him again in a multiplied fashion in the kingdom. But He's not talking about now.
So how can, if He's got the mark, how can He be?
Well, that's what I said at first. If He has the mark, He wouldn't be doing that. If He has the mark, He wouldn't be doing that. And the thing I got to think about that is, I presently see the mark as not a worldwide thing, but a localized Middle East thing. That's part of that thing that is an element that applies to Israel.
Isn't it specified that the unforgivable sin to take the mark?
No.
I mean, it's
No, it's not called, no.
It's not reversible.
It is reversible, but it's not called an unforgivable. I think there is a prescription for that. And, but anyway, just to say this for now, that thing gets misused, and that it's really about helping the remnant out in the day of wrath, who have no means of helping themselves. And then, let's see where we're going here. And I know my time is already up, but I got to get us down here. Proverbs 34. There is a generation whose teeth are as swords and their jaw teeth as knives, to devour the poor from off the earth and the needy from among men. That's not just people that hate poor people. That's talking again about the remnant. Okay, and then one more, Psalm 10:2. Back to Psalm 10. The wicked in his pride doth persecute the poor. And so that's what I'm trying to show you. Now, if you're back at your timeline, two more things we need to put on the timeline before we get away from here today. Here's the first one. Right here between the rapture and the start of the day of wrath, draw you a little bit of a rectangle box right there, and that is the remainder of the night that still has to take place. And then, I got to erase this extra writing that I have down here, because this is not part of our timeline and I need it right there. Hold on. Okay. And then, right down here, let's just do it right in here. Draw you an arrow down. I didn't want to go through the D, but anyway, just draw an arrow down and put this. Psalm 10:1 on that timeline. So draw that box, because remember, when he interrupted the night was far spent. Not completely spent, but far spent. So on the other side of the dispensation of grace, you've got the rest of the night, and then the day comes. And then right down here at the beginning of the wrath, put Psalm 10:1. And before we get away from here today, I have to talk to you about this verse in Psalm 10. Because it is important, that there's something about this. In fact, in Psalm 10:1, let me see if it's the next verse. No, 2, 3. Let me go back to it, because I should have put it up again in the PowerPoint. There it is. Look at what he says here. Look at the start of Psalm 10:1. This is the remnant. These are things they will say out there in the day of wrath. Why standest thou afar off, O Lord? Why hidest thou thyself in times of trouble? Now wait a minute. What is God supposed to begin doing for them as a mandate of the Davidic covenant once the day of wrath? Deliverer. He's supposed to deliver them. But in the beginning of the day of wrath, He doesn't deliver them. And it causes them to say, why are you standing so far off? Why are you hiding yourself in this time of trouble? Well, because they're counting on the fact that He's supposed to deliver them. He is not yet ready to begin accomplishing that mandate.
He's waiting for them to divide, right? The chaff and the wheat.
Oh, that's good. Karen says He's waiting for them to divide, the wheat and the chaff to kind of separate. And here, but there's actually a couple of more reasons. That's really good, Karen. That's really good. But let me give you a couple of other things, because there's a couple of reasons why they need a time of suffering. Just think about what I just said. Think about what
To get their sons their education.
That's exactly right, because that's part of their education. And as they undergo the suffering, there is a period of time. I'm not telling you how many days or weeks or months or whatever, but there's a period of time there in which they are not being delivered. And because they're not being delivered, and they're expecting to be delivered, they're making these statements. Why are you standing so far? Why are you hiding yourself in this time of trouble? And then look what they say. The wicked in his pride persecutes. Remember? So they're saying, why are you doing something here? Well, the point is, This is what takes place in the beginning. And just like we are suffering some things in the dispensation of grace that actually allows us to be more than conquerors, it's got to happen with them too.
So they can work with him as the avenger.
They've got to have that concept built in them. But there's another thing. I'm not saying anything we've talked about so far isn't it. It is. But there's another thing for the reason that God does not begin to function as the deliverer yet.
He needs sons and daughters with that education to reconcile in the heaven.
Okay, He's going to have sons and daughters that are getting educated, that are actually going to go into the kingdom, and that's really good. That's right. But I'm thinking about something that hasn't happened yet. Because before He begins to do that, the man of sin has to be revealed. In other words, before the Antichrist, He's not going to begin to function as the deliverer until after the Antichrist has come on the scene. That's a time issue. And so He is waiting now for several reasons. But you have to understand that look, by the way, look at this. Look at this verse 3. I'm sorry. Verse 3. For the wicked boasteth of his heart's desire, and blesseth the covetous, whom the Lord abhorreth. Isn't that telling them God's attitude toward the wicked and all that's going on? He abhors that. And because they know that, that's all the more reason to say, God, we know you hate this. We know you abhor this. Why aren't you doing something? And it's because these things that we've talked about have to be produced in them, just like it's going to have to be produced in us. One other thing here, let me get us back over there to where we were. Where are we? The wicked persecute, verse 3. Okay, now Psalm 5:4. Remember, we read this. Thou shalt destroy them that speak leasing. The Lord will abhor the bloody and deceitful man. There's going to be wicked men over there that will actually get involved in promoting all the ungodliness that's going on. But here's the thing I want you to notice about this last part that I've highlighted. It's not men plural, it's man singular. There is a particular bloody and deceitful man, and that's the guy He's waiting on. Is it okay to say there will be bloody and deceitful men who will partner with him? Of course. But this one is talking about a particular man. And this is the guy that I was talking to you about there. Now let me see if I've got all those verses, because I haven't got you through all of the. I guess we did. So let me just end this by saying this. Why I know the remnant's going to be looking at that. Why are they looking at that? For the same reason we're looking at it. Because all of this is meant to form a godly disdain and abhorrence for Satan's works of darkness and the ungodliness that it is producing in the world. Once we start to feel about it like our Father does, that's the godly thinking He's trying to get generated in us, that we see it the way He sees that. Now, at the end of your notes, you have a little thing there in quick, about 11 questions that says self-test. As you go home this week, I would really encourage you to read these notes through and then see how many of these questions you can answer out of your own memory, your knowledge of what you have. Everything in those questions are in your notes. The answers are there. And they're stated just about the way they are in the questions. But the reason I put those questions there is because before we move on to the next set of information now, these are the things that really have to be able to be answered by you. And I know these questions may seem general, but we're going to go over them at the start of next week's lesson. I'll fill in the answers, but I'd really like for you to look at those and see if you can do that, because these questions are asked in a specific way. For instance, when the first says, what is Paul referring to when he says the night is far spent, the day is at hand? These are all very nutshell type answers. And I've given you all of that in the notes. This is a way for us to gauge ourselves, because now because you've gotten most of everything you need to see about this first phrase. And you know the answer to this one. What is... There is something Paul is referring to when he talks about that. There is a reason for doing it that way. Those are the things I want us to be able to put it together and think about it this way. All right, let's have a word of prayer and then we'll be done. Father, thank you for your goodness to us. And we're so grateful, Lord, that we have this word that's able to instruct us. And as we look back at the way things were when you interrupted this dispensation of grace, we understand how you felt about the ungodliness that was in the world, how you felt about those works of darkness, how you felt about the wicked that were promoting and increasing the works of darkness and the ungodliness. And we understand that by being long-suffering, it does not mean that your justice has not been provoked in this dispensation of grace, but that you are accomplishing something more important. But once it's over, that you will have your day, and you will put an end to the darkness and to the night. May these verses do the work in us that you have designed for them to do. Because as we get ready to leave the godly thinking aspect and move into the godly living aspect, we're going to need that to be in place. And I realize how important this is. So we pray to that end, that thinking would be in us and these verses would produce it to the extent